want to thank Chris for the introduction. Did you get my office? Yeah, he just said, the one I used to have, the one in Russell? Yeah. Did you find any cash or gold bars? No. Is there media here? There's a call. It's a joke. It's a joke. You know, guys know. Thank you, Chris, for that introduction, and actually very proud of the work he did with us on the Small Business Committee, and Oren and everyone here in American Compass for hosting me here tonight. A couple observations of seeing someone. We really only got to serve together for like 10 days, you know, because I got confirmed pretty quickly. And by the way, the president was, I got 99 out of 100 votes because the vice president at the time had seated up and filled, and the president for some period of time expressed great concern about the fact that I had 99 votes in the Senate. He didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. But I told him recently, sir, you don't have to worry about that anymore. I don't think I'd get 99 votes now. And anyways, but thank you for this chance to speak to you. And by one more thing I want to tell you about, I spent, you know, now that I'm in an executive branch, we oftentimes have to deal with the fact that, you know, we want to do something and it's like, well, but there's a statute or there's a law on the books that limit our ability to do things by executive action. You know, it requires us to go through certain steps. And so I increasingly find myself saying, who the hell wrote these laws? And today I was reminded it was actually me who passed a certain law that stood as an impediment to quick action. So anyways, yeah, I've grown in my appreciation for the executive branch more and more each day. And but that's also, the media is going to say, oh, he's for an authoritarian form of government. No, I just, you know, some of these laws I passed are getting in the way of my current life. So we have to work through it. We will. But thank you guys for this chance and the work that you've done. And I know that obviously you're going to spend a lot of time focused on domestic decisions, but I want to hopefully pitch you a little bit tonight about what I've learned and what I already believe coming into this job, that so much about what happens domestically, economically, is increasingly intertwined in geopolitics. It always has been. I think that's one of the lessons we forgot, but I think we've been reminded of that here most recently, and a number of events have brought that to bear. The first thing I would say is I think it's always been true. One of the amazing things, one of the reasons why history repeats itself, people like to say that, is because human nature does not change. Technology's changed, what the clothes we wear change, even languages change, governments change, a lot of things change. But the one thing that is unchanged is human nature. It's the same today as it was 5,000 years ago, and that's one of the reasons why history often repeats itself. And one of the things about human nature, I'm not trying to sound like a psychologist here, but one of the things I think history proves is that one of the things we are programmed as people with is the desire to belong. In fact, if you notice, if you put humans anywhere, a handful of people anywhere, one of the first things they start doing is trying to create things that they can join or be a part of. And that's true for nationhood and nation states. The concept of nationhood. Now, it's a new concept. I mean, before that but we had something, you know, we always had organizations, whether it was city-states or tribal organizations, but the advent of the nation-state is a normal evolution of human behavior because people think it's important to belong to something, and being part of a nation is important. And I think that's really true, obviously, increasingly in how geopolitical decisions are made. I think that's obvious and people understand that, but it's one of the things that we forgot. And we certainly forgot it at the end of the Cold War. If I can take you back to the end of the Cold War, and understand, for me, these are formative years because I grew up in the 80s, probably the greatest decade ever, confirmed by the, yeah. You know why I know this? Because my kids, I have young, well, I say young, they're like 24, 22, 20, just turned 20, and one who's 17. All they do is watch reruns from the 80s and 90s. They don't make good TV anymore. Everybody wants to watch stuff from the 80s and 90s, so that's just my pitch. The 70s were a dark period of time because of disco music. But in the 80s, we got a disco fan back there. But the 80s, you know, we did, the hair was a little too big, but other than that. But going back, the 80s, you grew up, and I remember in 1983, now I'm aging, I just turned 54. I feel 55, but must be 1983. Do you guys remember a movie called oh gosh, what was it? It was about nuclear war. Do you remember this? It was No, War Games. That was a great movie. I'm talking about when I was on TV that scared the hell out of me. There was The Day After. Do you remember that movie, The Day After? This was traumatizing, and they had this thing on television. But basically grew up understanding that the world at any moment could end because the United States and the Soviet Union were headed for conflict and war, and that, maybe we wouldn't even make it to 25 and things of this nature. I forgot about War Games. War Games is another good movie where this guy hacks into the computer. This is an 80s hacker. This was not, I can remember the phone and the modem, and what was that actor? It was the same, Matthew Broderick. It's a great movie. I know I'm completely off topic, but let me just tell you, I lived in Las Vegas at the time, and if you recall, the first city that he blows up in the War Games is Las Vegas. And I was sitting in the audience, and so everybody's like chuckling. There's nothing funny about this Las Vegas strike. In any event, so this is where we grew up. And then in 1989 and 1990 and 91, it was my first years in college. And literally the entire world just transformed before my very eyes. Understand, you grow up your whole life and like the whole world is about the Soviet Union, and all of a sudden the Soviet Union no longer exists. My favorite memory of that is that I was actually taking a course that fall by a Soviet expert at, I think it was in Gainesville, Florida. And this poor guy's entire career came crumbling down over a 3-month period as the Soviet Union collapsed. It's like all these years of work, you have a PhD in Soviet studies, and now the Soviet doesn't exist anymore. So I don't know what he did after that. I need to check up on that guy because, but anyways, the point is the whole world transformed. And there was this effusive exuberance, the belief that the Cold War is over, we won, and now the entire world is going to become just like us. Free enterprise democracies. This is a very idealistic thing to believe. But here's the other conclusion they made, and that is that nationhood no longer mattered when it came to economics. That right now the world would no longer have borders. It wouldn't matter where things were made. What mattered is they were made in the most efficient place. And it became mantra. And look, I think it became part of Republican orthodoxy for a very long time, an orthodoxy that I came up in, which was it's okay if productive capacity moves to another country. Because what that will do is it will free up our workers to do work that's even more productive and pays them more. It was the famous or the infamous idea that who cares that you lost your job at a factory, you're going to learn how to code. And then you're going to make a lot more money doing that. Well, it was completely unrealistic, number one, and became incredibly disruptive that decision was made. But here's the other implication of it. It robbed the nation of its industrial capacity, of its ability to make things. And its industrial capacity and its ability to make things has two ramifications. The first is it hurts your economy. It hurts your country. It robs people of jobs, and the transition is not nearly as easy, but it also ends up becoming corrosive and destructive to communities. And as a result, we had a Rust Belt. We had places that were gutted. And we had families that for generations had worked in a certain field or for a certain company, and all of a sudden that company or that field vanished because it moved somewhere else where it was cheaper to do, and those jobs were gone, and obviously became incredibly destructive, not just for the United States, by the way, but for many nations in the industrialized West. But the other thing it robbed us of is the ability to make things, which is a national security impairment, and a very significant one. If you go back to the World War II, the admiral who had been tasked with planning Pearl Harbor thought it was a really bad idea. He went through and obviously followed orders, but he thought it was a very bad idea because he had spent a substantial amount of time studying in the United States when he was younger. And his conclusion was that attacking the United States was a bad idea because even though at the time militarily we were behind the Japanese, certainly technologically and otherwise, we had factories and we had access to raw material and resources. And he knew that over time, once those factories and those raw materials were put to the war machine, the Japanese would not be able to keep up. And you could very well argue that the end of World War II, that the victory in World War II, both in Europe and especially in Asia, was the result of America's industrial capacity. When the Japanese lost the plane, they lost the plane. When we lost the plane, and their planes were better than ours for a long time, when we lost the plane, we were able to produce hundreds to replace it. Industrial capacity mattered in terms of national security. And that's never changed. That's always been true.
Impediment. The language barrier was an impediment to their communication. Authoritarian. The country was ruled by an authoritarian government. Intertwined. Their lives have become deeply intertwined over the years. Tribal. The tribal customs are still practiced in the remote villages. Rerun. The TV station decided to rerun the popular series. Traumatizing. The accident was traumatizing for everyone involved. Collapsed. The old building collapsed after the earthquake. Effusive. She gave an effusive thanks for all the help she received. Exuberance. The children played with great exuberance in the park.
If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date with future videos. Thank you for watching.